Welcome to our topic, Today's and Tomorrow's Business Context, Understanding the Dynamics for Successful Business. This is part of the open area of the Biz Navigator offered by Shuja. My name is Lori Elliott, and I will be your navigator for today. Let's start with understanding our objectives. First, I will describe the business context, its elements and relationships. Next, we will identify the dynamics of the business context. We will then identify useful organizational structures for today's and tomorrow's business context. And finally, we'll describe two approaches to strengthen organizational success. When we think of a business context, there are actually different elements. First, there is the business environment, which is external to your business. There is the ecosystem, which has elements of both your internal business and your external environment. And within your ecosystem, there is your competition. And then, of course, there is your business. Let's first take a look at what the business environment consists of. The business environment consists of factors that may influence or impact your business over which you generally have little influence or control. For example, if we think of the financial or the airline industry, oftentimes there are government regulations that come to play that you have to deal with and respond to. You really don't have a choice as to whether or not you will implement on them. Now, the type of factors include political, economic, social, and technological. And when we think of technological, it doesn't have to be things like computers or software. It could be other innovations like process innovations. For example, FedEx had a technological change because they were actually able to, in their time, become the leader in shipping because they were able to track the shipments very strongly and provide an open environment for people who had shipments coming also to track their product. When we talk about the business ecosystem, this is a little bit richer. It's an economic community supported by a foundation of interacting organizations and individuals, the organisms of the business world. This economic community produces goods and services of value to customers, who are themselves members of the ecosystem. The member organizations also include suppliers, lead producers, competitors, and other stakeholders. For some of you, this may be related to what we call value chain. That is, how do we create that value and then deliver it to the customer? Who are the actors along the way? We also can call it a value network. But essentially, an ecosystem is not just a linear relationship. It's horizontal, vertical, all angles. So it's a much richer look at what your business is involved in. Also, over time, business ecosystems co-evolve their capabilities and roles and tend to align themselves with the direction set by one or more central companies. Those companies holding leadership roles may change over time, but the function of ecosystem leader is valued by the community because it enables members to move toward shared visions, to align their investments, and to find mutually supportive roles. We can look at that maybe like in the software industry, for example, the iTunes store. It creates a platform for people, musicians, artists, motivational speakers, people who develop products to actually deliver their products to Apple consumers or iTunes consumers. What is competition? It's very simple. That's where two or more entities compete directly or indirectly to get customers. For example, if you're in electronics, you might have a local store that competes directly with your store. An indirect competitor might be someone like Walmart, who's an aggregator that has a lot of different products. And as people come into the store, they might see some of the electronics you sell in the store and purchase from Walmart instead of you. Now, when we look at your business, what key elements become a part of this ecosystem? First of all, there's strategy. And strategy is very simply, what value do you bring to the market? A fuller definition is strategy is the direction and scope of an organization over the long term. which achieves advantage for the organization through its configuration of resources within a challenging environment to meet the needs of markets and to fulfill stakeholder expectations. So essentially, strategy is your means to competitively set yourself apart from others. Generally, strategy consists of vision, mission, values, goals, objectives, plans of action, etc. This is something that we'll not cover here, but can be offered in more detail at a later point. Also, your business consists of what we call a business model. This is how do you logically create that value. A business model reflects the relationships that it takes between things, actors, systems, in order to create that value, which is a product or service to your customers. A more full definition of business model is it defines the value creation priorities of an actor in respect to the utilization of both internal and external resources. It defines how the actor relates with stakeholders, such as actual and potential customers, employees, unions, suppliers, competitors, and other internal groups. It takes account of situations where the actor's activities may affect the business environment and its own business in ways that create conflicting interests or impose risks on the actor, or B, develop new, previously unpredicted ways of creating value. And again, the business model actually becomes a part of your competitive advantage. For example, you may have found a supply chain that reaches a broader number of people than your competitors. And if you have access to that chain, your market share can grow because you have a larger pool of people to pull from. And in that case, you're not necessarily directly competing with other competitors in your field. Now, also there's what we call the business process model. What is the process to create the value? What steps, what activities, what tasks do you take in order to create that product? For example, in order to deliver a meal to a customer in the restaurant, okay? You'll have triggers, inputs, activities, and outputs. First of all, the trigger is that the customer orders a meal. Secondly, the inputs would be the raw materials, such as the cooking equipment, the stove, the products, the agricultural products, fruits, vegetables, meats, all of those things as inputs. The activities is actually the cook preparing the meal. The output is the meal itself, and then delivering it to the customer. Now, oftentimes, we only think of the business process model, but there are also supporting functions like human resources, sales, and marketing, and finance. For example, when I talked about that example of serving a meal in a restaurant, you have people there. They have to be paid. You have to meet safety regulations. You have to bank. You as a company may have to get loans. You may have to purchase items from suppliers. So all of those are standard functional things that undergird the business process. The business process itself is what it takes, the stream or the line that it takes in order to create that value for the customer, and that all of these functional elements support it. Finally, we have what we call the organizational model, and that's how are people organized to create that value. An organization or an enterprise is actually a group of people that are formally brought together to deliver a particular value. When we talk about organizational model, it defines the role and responsibilities of each person. And generally, we can see this reflected in some type of organizational chart. Now, we've talked about the elements of the business context. But let's just spend a few moments talking about the dynamics of the business context. And this is the context for business today and tomorrow. And some of the problems that companies have been having is that they have not been seeing the difference between previous periods in the industrial era, where we built automobiles, we had manufacturing, mass manufacturing, As we have moved into the knowledge economy or the networked economy, things have changed, the dynamics have changed, and companies have not responded. So the thing is for you as an enterprise is to understand what the business context will be like from now and moving forward. And there are 4 key characteristics. Chaos. That means that there will always be things out of order. The key is to not get rid of the chaos, because you can't. But what you can do is you can create an order that takes the energy of the chaos and organizes it in such a way to move your company and your enterprise forward. Complexity is another thing. There are so many elements in a business ecosystem that makes it complex. It's not only the actors, but their relationships, their interdependencies. All of those things create a complex environment. Also, continual change. Things will change from day to day. When we talk about the business environment, one week there could be a regulation that is open to your organizational design. For example, with dealing with the airlines, there may be certain safety regulations that are not strict enough to provide adequate safety on airplanes for passengers. So there might be legislation that's taken to tighten that. That actually changes how you need to do your business. It impacts a piece of that. And we'll always have continual change. It may be change in the business environment. It may be in your competitive landscape. It may be in your internal business. You may find that you have different dynamics of different types of people, for example, who are employed in your organization. You might also have changes in your ecosystem. Your supply chain might end up being different. And then, of course, speed. Everything is happening at the speed of light these days. So all of these are dynamics that you have to deal with. The problem that organizations have is that they are not designed to respond accordingly or use these elements, these dynamics, to help synergize and energize their organizations. In many cases, they're actually fighting against the tide. So what we're going to talk about next is just appropriate organizational structures that will actually help you. First of all is organic. You need to think of your enterprise as a living system versus what we call a mechanistic system. In the industrial age, organizations were put together like putting together a car. The problem with mechanistic systems is that they break down and they have to be maintained. And there's a lot of pieces and things that have to be corrected and continual correction. So essentially, at one point, they die out. Living systems continue to evolve. So they shift and they change, and maybe certain parts of them die out, but they continually grow if they are healthy. And that's our goal. We don't want to become extinct like the dinosaurs. Now, also, you can think of organizational structures that are open. They focus on creating mutual value in the enterprise's ecosystem amongst the stakeholders, amongst the consumers, even some competitors. It's not so focused on the value only for the enterprise. The last part is fluid. This is more of a state than an organizational structure. It's the state organisms or living systems or living enterprises are to maintain to be healthy and growing. So essentially the idea is we want to be able to flow as organizations with our business context. So there will be things that we need to do, strategies, methodologies, things that we need to employ in order to be able to maintain this state. And when we do this, then we grow healthy and we continue to grow. We don't become extinct. Now, these are very general and high-level elements. There are strategies and methodologies that you'll have to employ to do this. But right now, we're really talking about a mindset that you need to have with your enterprise. Now, let me also say that fluid organizations can be called flexible, adaptive, adaptable. Those are other terms that we often hear related to this type of organizational structure. You'll also find that these organizations tend to be what we call flat instead of hierarchical. That means that there are not so many levels of employees or workers or managers or senior management. There's more of a flat organization where everyone is seen as a leader and a peer, but they are responsible for a piece of the business process or the business model. And finally, what are the appropriate approaches? Okay, if we want to respond to these the business context, the dynamics, and we also want to maintain the appropriate organizational structure. Everything can be anchored on two things. First of all, strategy. We've already explained what strategy is, and what strategy does is that helps you set your focus. Okay, and you go all through the part of analyzing the business context in order to have the appropriate strategy. And at this point, also, you can include your business model as a part of the strategy as well. The other key point is agility. It's actually a methodology. It is the ability to respond rapidly to changes in the business context. Businesses today and leading into tomorrow also need to make agility a key enabler of their organization. And if you get to the point where agility is systematic in your organization, you are actually making change a routine part of the organization. Now, that doesn't mean that every part changes every day all the time, but you have a system in place that allows you to respond and be proactive to the dynamics that are going on in your business context. Now, this sets the stage for how we approach and the topics that we talk about and the things that we focus on in the Biz Navigator, because we want businesses to be evolving and continually growing. We don't want them to become extinct. So there needs to be a change in the types of learning and coaching that's going on. There will always be training that's needed for accounting and bookkeeping and all of the compliance issues and some of the basic capacity issues. But really, we need to focus a lot on how to keep companies competitive. So our focus with the Biz Navigator is not so much to tell you about compliance things. You can go to other people for that. Also, basic capacity stuff. You can also go to other people for that. We will obviously talk about all of those things and actually work through many of those things like the business plan, how do you do a marketing plan? But all of it will be in light of the business context for today and tomorrow, the proper responses, the proper approaches, and how you, in all of this, are able to maintain and grow your competitive advantage. So let's just take a look at some of the other topics that we have that are open automatically for you, whether you are part of our Biz Navigator community or whether you just are a guest. First of all, the other topics that are available in our open area are setting your strategy, the business model, the heart of the business plan, and then we have a series called Today's and Tomorrow's Business Paradigms. There are several paradigms that are going on that are shifting right now, and businesses are having a very difficult time. So for entrepreneurs who are new and emerging, we want them to be on top of the game, not behind. In fact, we'd like them to help leap the paradigm shifts further, moving them forward instead of stagnating while there's a struggle between the old guard and the new guard. Some of those topics will talk about how chaos and complexity are involved in our business environment. We'll also talk about what is work really going to be like today and tomorrow in what we call the entrepreneurial and leader societies. And also, what will our consumers look like? Where is the shift? What are the patterns that we're seeing in terms of our consumers? And that can be predicated on what we understand to be vision and creative societies that are emerging at this point in time. They're actually there, but there's a struggle again with the old guard. So essentially what we're trying to do is make you look forward, but working in the present with all of these dynamics. So we hope that you enjoy our approach and our focus. If you need recommendations about where to go to get bookkeeping or accounting assistance so you can learn how to do those basics, we will definitely be glad to help you do that. But what we want to do is we want to be at that top of the game. We want to be at that part that helps you maintain that competitive advantage. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in some of our other topics.